Hey, all right. So answering another question here. This, first of all, I just want to clarify, is like not a video essay. This is just off the cuff comments about how music works. Okay, so Sterling, cool name by the way, wants to know, I'll read this off in the exact language. Okay, what kinds of things can you do when you know the full major scale rather than just the pentatonic? Oh boy. As I said, oh boy, this is a good one. I'll make a response now. So this is the response. Okay, so first of all, just like proof that I know my stuff, I'm just gonna like play some rubato stuff over like a 2-5-1 in A flat, and so what that means is B flat minor 7, E flat 7, A flat 7, right? Over B flat minor, E flat 7, A flat major 7. Okay, cool. So I know how to play guitar. I know how to play notes. Okay, so oh boy, where do we start? Okay, first off, there is almost no music ever that actually only uses the pentatonic scale. People say, what about blues? Okay, so blues has microtones, and by that I mean notes between the equal tempered notes. So there's a big difference between, and for example, you know, this is up a whole step. This, just a tiny bit. Okay, so already the pentatonic scale is kind of an abstraction, right? It's a way to get guitarists started. Also, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, there are exceptions like a lot of like Chinese traditional music and maybe classical music actually uses the pentatonic major scale, I believe. I think they're still using bends and stuff. And then there's a tuning in gamelan music that uses something that resembles like the major pentatonic. I think so there are exceptions in the world, but when we're talking about the pentatonic scale as it relates to guitar playing in sort of like Western blues, pop, rock contexts, and in things like jazz, even when we're talking about people who are kind of using a bluesy sound, a pentatonic minor-ish sound, what they're doing is working with pitch in a much more refined way. So when we're talking about just using these notes, that's really an abstraction. Um, One more kind of just before I give my full answer, historical context is that something happens in pop and rock music in the late 60s, which is that people who are learning pop music and writing pop music prior to, the late 60s distortion for guitars and stuff are people who grew up playing another type of music. So like Jimmy Page grew up playing like skiffle, like the Beatles were playing, I believe, R&B songs in the Hamburg era. I'm not really an authority on this, like from, you know, but it's basically the case that people who learned music prior to rock music being about like being big on the radio were learning chords. They were learning seventh chords, they were learning chords that were moving around. So something happens where people start to learn guitar from records where there's rock guitar music already, which is that this kind of simplified, codified language for self-educating musicians gets started. And so you hear, what was this intentionally, I believe, reductive harmonic language in like Black Sabbath, becomes all that people know how to play. And so it goes from being this is simple and that makes it rebellious to this is simple and people only know the simple things. That there's kind of this filtering out of an awareness of harmony that happens with a lot of rock musicians. So you will hear examples of people who are actually playing just the pentatonic once this type of learning guitar becomes like sort of like historically established. Okay, so besides music, or people learned to play guitar in this way and so they start using the pentatonic, there isn't much music that's actually pentatonically driven. And even in the case of that music, you usually have a bass player that's playing some notes that are outside of the pentatonic minor scale. I can't think of much music where everybody in the band is only using the minor or pentatonic minor scale. Okay, so that's a big answer. So that's the beginning of a big answer. Okay, so if we're talking about the major scale, whereas there isn't really much music that's only using the pentatonic minor scale, there's a lot of music that's only using one major scale. What the major scale does is it gives us this whole system of functional harmony where we have, a one chord, two chord, three chord, four, five, six, seven, and one, right? Okay, and so basically, as soon as you really start learning the major scale, you start to, if you're practicing it the right way, if you have a good teacher, you start to have access to sounds that will allow you to create harmonic contrast from one chord to another, and live inside the world of each chord, understand how these chords relate to each other. And what you really start to do is get the truth about how music exists. I think the minor pentatonic is useful as a pedagogical device that gets beginner guitarists going. So it gets people getting some sound on the instrument, but a lot of guitarists stop there. So once you can play the minor pentatonic, people will start to often feel pretty limited with the colors that they're getting usually in their solos. If you're learning full songs, you're going to be learning music that uses more than the minor pentatonic. Like if you're playing a song that has a G chord and a C chord, right? We have already 6 notes between, 5 notes. Okay, music that has G, C, and D, right? There are more than 5 notes in those chords. So already, if we're using just those 3 chords, we're playing music that's not only using the minor pentatonic scale. So you say, what about using the minor pentatonic scale for soloing? We can do this. And then maybe you play E minor pentatonic over it, right? This guitar falls out of tune really quickly. Whatever, minor pentatonic stuff over G, that's fine for a while, and maybe you'll be fine with it forever, but there's a question of if you're getting bored. And for me, I get bored really fast with those notes, not because I think that really crazy advanced harmony is better, but because if you're only playing the minor pentatonic over 3 chords, you're turning this 3-chord structure, which contains a lot of possibility for contrast, for form. You can use different notes over different chords to distinguish them and create all kinds of different little builds of energy and stuff. You're sacrificing all of that and turning, some 3-chord sequence into one harmonic plane. So if you're just playing the minor pentatonic, you're treating all the chords as if they're basically interchangeable over what you're playing. The thing is that that's not how the sound works, though. So here's what I mean. I'm going to play the same riff, same minor pentatonic riff over 3 different chords, right? So we've got G, right? That's one sound. E, D, B. Then over C, E, D, B, D, G. Those all sound different, right? Even if it's not that different, the bass note changes the way that those notes sound. So if you're only playing the minor pentatonic over shifting harmony, then you're treating the music as if the notes have the same effect over all the different chords. You're kind of turning the chord progression into just like one chord, except that you're going to be getting a lot of sound results that you don't have control over because you don't know how the scale relates to the different chords. Now, you can come back to this and be like a really harmonically sophisticated jazz musician and probably be doing this and know exactly how every note in the pentatonic relates to all those different chords. But I'm assuming that you're not on that level if you're asking this question, which is all good. So yeah, basically, if you can start learning the major scale, learning it all over the neck, that's going to be big. And I think as you do that, you're going to start to find like just a crazy number of options. I think it's going to really change the game for you. So yeah, honestly, with my students, I try to get them playing the A major scale all over the neck as quickly as possible. No question. It is absolutely the right way to go. So, yeah, I hope this was helpful. Let me know, I guess, if you have more questions. It's cool making these little video responses. Yeah, so I hope I'm not like ranting too much. I've kind of had a lot of caffeine on this Monday, which is my passion. I'm passionate about caffeine and music.